Good news today for Colorado. Deion Sanders, Brett McMurphy just put this up. Deion Sanders saying that, in fact, Travis Hunter, who was hurt in that Kansas State game, the shoulder injury, he walked off, did not come back. And the good news for the Buffaloes is Travis Hunter, and I think really for college football fans overall, is Travis Hunter will be able to play this week.
Yeah, that's great for him, and you know it does often hurt people's Heisman chances. You know, he's already going to be in a race with Ashton Genty and Cam Ward, and you know whoever else jumps into this thing. But those are the top three guys I would say right now statistically they're doing well, or at least publicly. And if you're going to miss 2 or 3 games, if you've got a shoulder injury, then that's going to slow you down. But that's huge news for Colorado to have their best player back out on the field.
Yeah, Jimmy Horn Jr. also expected back for Colorado, although Marion Miller, who hasn't been a huge impact guy for them per se, he is going to miss the rest of the year. He's already had surgery apparently, so they got dinged pretty thoroughly at wide receiver in that game last weekend. And good news is that outside of Marion Miller, I mean, they're 2 huge targets there, the two main guys, and Jimmy Horn Jr. and Travis Hunter will be available. So, yeah, that's definitely great news for Shedeur. That's great news for Deion Sanders and his entire staff and that whole program to know they're going to have their Heisman contender and also another pretty good player that's made some huge plays for you this year. So that's great for Colorado. It's great for the Big 12. I still think it's, one of those things where you have your detractors, but that's a good thing. In this case, Colorado, that team that everybody loves to hate, or that team that people love but everybody else loves to hate. There's not a lot of other teams around the league like that. I actually saw, it was like Ben Koo or something from like Awful Announcing last week had a piece on how the Big 12 has a problem. It's always like, oh my God, the sky is falling. And I'm like, okay, what now is it? What's the big problem now for the Big 12? And the big problem, according to him, was that outside of Colorado, the Big 12 doesn't have anybody that brings people's eyeballs casual-wise, brings big TV ratings. And it's like, yeah, the catch to all these, though, is like, well, if Deion's not there any longer, and I know that a lot of people assume that he won't be after this year. We'll see on that, but he still is there. I understand the point being made, but it's like, why are we skipping ahead to assuming he's already not here? It's like, right now they have that team. He's there. They are bringing the TV ratings. Let's worry about that if he were to leave. But right now, yeah, that's not a problem, and it especially won't be if they have their best players available. So that's great because they should still be highly competitive and be in a lot of these games. And plus, I just want to see the best play. And Travis Hunter is certainly one of the best in the country.
One thing I get this thing called the college football blitz, and I sometimes there's a nugget or two that I pull from it. In the last, I believe it has been since 2016 through last year, excluding COVID, a team that's among the top 10 for total value as far as viewerships is Oklahoma State. They've been consistent. They're not what you would call a big brand like when you think of Blue Bloods by any means, but they've done pretty well. Total ratings as far as Nielsen, there's a few teams in that list, and Oklahoma State's in the top 25, but at certain time periods, they have been very much. Now, not as powerful as what Colorado brings to the table. Good news, Travis Hunter's back. Jimmy Horn Jr. appears to be back, and they play Arizona on the road this week. Meanwhile, I hope that I'm not wrong for expressing this feeling, but when I saw late yesterday evening Josh Furlong tweet that Cam Rising was out, we knew he's pretty much out, but that he's done for the year. I hate that for Cam Rising. I hate that for Utah football. But for them to get back on track and start to win or not with Isaac Wilson, to me, this was, again, I hope he's going to be okay, but this is something where they have to just move on. And here's the statement. There you see it from Coach Whittingham. Upon further evaluation, our medical staff, his injury, Cam Rising, has unfortunately been deemed season-ending. During his time at Utah, Cam has been both a great player and leader for our program, and he will obviously be missed. Any future developments concerning his collegiate eligibility will be addressed at a later date.
Ari Temkin hit it on the head yesterday in his comparison. It was the last couple years of Tony Romo where when he got hit, he was hurt. And it was just, how bad is he going to be hurt?
Yep.
Every single time. And that's why the Cowboys, who really did not want to move on from Tony Romo, and Tony Romo didn't want to move on, and then were given this gift called Dak Prescott. That worked out, but they had to make that tough decision. But I think that right now we're in a situation with Utah where I think they have to make the same one. It's just every time he's out there, he gets hurt. He got hurt in the Baylor game. He finally comes back against Arizona State. What happens? He got hurt. It's probably time to move on.
As a human being, I hate for Cam Rising that his college career doesn't end on a higher note or one that was on his own terms. But that's also the risk that you run when you play as long as he has. He could have called it a career last year, could have called it a career the year prior and moved on to the next level or whatever it is he plans to do, but he kept coming back, so you raise the risk level of it not ending exactly how you want it to, right? Mm-hmm. And so as a human being, I hate that it's going to end on his college career, at least at Utah, on a note where the last you saw him, he looked like the closest comparison to RG3 in the Redskins playoff game a few years ago, where you're going take him out of the game. He's hurt.
Yep.
God, give him a lot of credit, but take him out of the game, Kyle Whittingham. And I think a lot of people were feeling that way. So when you see that,
that's a towel.
Yeah. When you see that, that's an awful way for somebody's career to quote unquote end. But that's the way life works sometimes. And is it the end of his college football career? He has an 8th year, as it was outlined yesterday. For me, at least, and I don't know how Utah fans feel about it. I know there's a number of them that probably agree with this based on what I've seen. But if his college career continues, it's not going to be in Salt Lake City. Unless they have another school I'm not aware of. But it will not be as a Utah Ute, and it doesn't need to be as a Utah Ute. They need to move on. He needs to move on. They've had their fill. It's been a great partnership, but it needs to turn the corner into something else at this point. And there's no way you could bring him back and go, all right, let's just hope he stays healthy. It's we've done this for 3 years now. We're not I would revolt if I was a Utah fan, and I think that they know that. I think you sense that. I think this is part of that. This is the end of Cam Rising at Utah, and it needs to be. No disrespect to him, but that's the sentiment I get from a large portion of the Utah community that you see online as well, and just some of the commentators on their side of the fence that I've seen. So, yeah, that's unfortunate. He's a really good player. As a human being, like I said, I feel for him, but as a college football fan, get out of there. I don't want any more 7-year quarterbacks, 8-year quarterbacks. I get it, COVID year and all that, but see you later. Good luck to you on whatever's next, but as a college football fan, I'm not a big proponent of 7- and 8-year guys. So see you down the road, and tremendous career, and I do hope the best for him, and it's a terrible way to end.
Yeah, it's his career. It's not ours. Doctors, of course, have an influence on that. Maybe family does too, but it's you don't want to end up having, like I said yesterday, a former champion in boxing or even all the other sports now walk away where he just looks like a shell of himself. I applaud the courage, what he's trying to do, maybe one more win for the Gipper type of thing, but that was sad to watch what he was going through on Friday.
It was also a product of their own doing, because for so long they played that game of will he, won't he. We're not really shedding much light, to the point of not just the media, which can get annoyed at the slightest thing, but your own general fan base started to kind of get annoyed by the entire thing. And then the other night, he's clearly out there trying to prove people wrong and stay in the game and not be hurt again, right? And not get pulled again. And so he's out there to the detriment of himself, trying to probably prove the audience, that he is tough enough, and he doesn't need to be doing that at this stage, in my opinion. It's not going to do him any good. Look, you're tough, dude. You're a really good player, but sometimes it just is what it is, and this is college football. It's not the pros where you last as long as you can possibly last. That's not the way it's designed, so I think all the writing's on the wall, and if he plays college football next year, I would just bank on it not being in Salt Lake City, Utah for Kyle Whittingham.
It's not quite Charlie Brewer, because Charlie had a really good career at Baylor, but eventually he was just beating up damaged goods. He kept trying. Then who did he go to after Utah?
Liberty.
Yeah, and it didn't work out there either. All right, so there's that. Neal Brown. I received Bobby from Myrtle Beach, huge West Virginia fan. S. Michael DeHart sent me this note. I did not know about this until I received this, that Neal Brown in his weekly presser after the loss at home, that was a huge game against Iowa State, said to the fan base, and I mean, there are people frustrated as heck over this. I get that they want to win. Did they have a good time? It was a pretty good atmosphere. I'm assuming they had a pretty good time and tailgating, etc. I look at the weather. It's going to be nice again. It's a nice night game. We need them to provide a home field advantage. This was from Neal Brown, West Virginia football coach, and a lot, I mean a ton of people have responded to that, saying that this was an awful statement for him to make after the loss to Iowa State.
It's a true thing that I think every coach probably wants their fans to be like the people in Ames, right? Where rain or shine,
super passive-aggressive,
snow or
Midwest nice.
I'm just saying that whenever there's Nebraska's this way too. Whenever there's a sporting event, they go. Like, that's what the coaches want.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that, and I'm giving the benefit of that, that's what he's trying to convey. Like, please, like, it can get better, but keep going and keep the faith. I ask you to trust me, trust these guys, and do that. But the way he said it sounds a little condescending, because he's like, hey, the weather's going to be nice. Like, I don't know what you guys are mad about. We're mad because you buy tickets to the game, and then bad things happen. It's not as fun when you're not winning and you lose to the especially the better teams we're playing. We feel like we have no chances of fan base to get an upset. It's disheartening, and West Virginia fans are already rabid, so they don't need to be told, like, hey, I need you guys to get crazier. They're like, how much more moonshine can I drink?
Yeah.
Like, what do you want from me? So, yeah, it's probably not an untrue statement that he made about, like, hey, go out and enjoy it, but also just don't. Like, it's not going to help you.
Well, if he had stuck to the second half of the statement rather than the first, it probably would have been okay when he says, I get they're frustrated we didn't win. We played a tough schedule. Everybody's that beat us hasn't lost, but that's no excuse. That's just the truth, and the games in our league are going to come down to the fourth quarter, and I don't think this one on Saturday is going to be any different. We need them to help us. I do get their frustration. That's not bad. We need you here to win close, to help us win close games. But that first paragraph before that, I get what they want to win. Did they have a good time? Did they enjoy it? The weather's nice. It's a night game, blah, blah, blah. Even if you say, and we need home field advantage, just people have already stopped listening because they're so turned off by the first part of what you said, where you're trying to put lipstick on a pig. And quite frankly, I just think West Virginia fans feel like you're cutting their balls off in a way. Like, where is the oomph? Where is the attitude? Where is the, most of all, winning? Where is the thing to latch onto? And instead, it's another big game loss, same thing recurring under Neal Brown. And, well, hey, at least you guys had a nice time. That's not West Virginia football. Like, you know, like that's not any program. That's not what they want to hear when you're losing big game after big game and you're kind of just spinning your wheels in place. So they have a big one this weekend. He's right. They do need home field advantage because every game's close in this league, but he delivered the message incorrectly and should have been wiser to know that his fan base is pretty sensitive right now to all things, and especially things coming out of his mouth when he's talking about the losing part of things. So to try and, you know, twist that to a way that makes sense, but also the way you delivered it, I think definitely not what West Virginia fans wanted to hear, and he's receiving that backlash, as is Ren Baker and everybody else involved at this point. So I said it yesterday. I said they're pretty fed up, and I don't know if that's going to be anything that causes something to occur sooner rather than later, like this year. I don't know how much longevity he gave himself with what they did a year ago, but certainly that clock is ticking again in Morgantown.
Here's a couple of responses. I can't believe what I just heard. So he gave up on having a football team, and now it's just for entertainment purposes, kind of like the Savannah Bananas or the Morgantown Marshmallows. Or maybe we should just not go into the games at all and just tailgate, which saved me a lot of money. From Bobby in Myrtle Beach, he had the perfect opportunity to try and rally the fans into believing it, for at least generating some type of excitement for Saturday's game. It was put on a platter for him, and that's the response he gave. Yes, he asked for their support and to show up. But after the first part of his answer, which, Craig, you said, he lost a lot of fans, as you can see with a few of the tweets below. Dan Lanning, my goodness, he took advantage of a loophole that I did not know existed. I don't know how many coaches know it existed. I don't know if the NCAA understood that there was a loophole that existed. But when he did what he did at the end of the game, of that game against Ohio State, the NCAA, what he was able to do is have time run off the clock, and Ohio State can't get it back when time was of the essence. And he found a loophole, said he practiced it, and the NCAA is now going, oops, we might have to have us handle this differently in the future.
Well, they're probably going to have to put time back on the clock for that, because why wouldn't I, in a situation, put an extra player out on the field? That guy could get an interception, and then even though it's not going to count, if the play took 9 seconds, all I wanted was the 9 seconds, really, or knock a play down, because that's all he wanted was the seconds to go off the clock. And I believe it was 6 or 7 that they lost on this particular play overall from Ohio State. It's Belichick-esque. It's brilliant.
Yep.
It's absolutely brilliant. And people will keep doing it until they change the rule and put the time back on, so there's no benefit to doing it. But that's the only thing it's going to be, because if it's – if they're at the 45-yard line and they're going to be at the 50 and they've got 5 seconds instead of 9, then yeah, I'm going to do that.
It was supposed to have. There was supposed to be, I believe, 10 seconds left in the game, but after that, there was just 6 seconds left, which is the one play. Although Will Howard could have handled that better too.
Yeah, he could have. That was one of the most dumbfounding ends to a game I've watched in a really long time. So I don't know how Will Howard's handled that, but has to be a pretty tough couple of days. And as far as Lanning goes, I mean, like you said, you had 10 seconds. You put an extra man out there. That way you can rest assured you're not going to give up the big play that you definitely can't give up. And you also waste some time off the clock and you take the penalty, but those 6 seconds are still, or 4 seconds are still gone and not coming back. And that puts Ohio State in a tougher position, and we know how they did not handle that. There's lots of talk about Ryan Day and the timeout that he had in his pocket, although if you're going to drive down and kick a field goal, so there's a lot of that back and forth on how Ryan Day was at fault. But for this story in particular, just kudos to Dan Lanning for finding a loophole in the system, and that's what college coaches do constantly. And you think you close one up and they find another one. And this was one that, I don't know how many people had ever considered this possibility and how it could work, especially in a big game like this. But Oregon was smart enough to realize it in the moment, or at least they're claiming that they did that intentionally. If not, then that's another story. But if it was calculated, then it was brilliant. I mean, it was brilliant gamesmanship. And at the same time, probably something that needs to be addressed. Now, typically I wouldn't be on board with doing it in the middle of the season, but I can kind of understand the spirit of the game, that's something you want to shut down after the NCAA and close that loophole, because you can't – there should be a reward for being able to have a penalty and then be rewarded for that. So I think actually addressing it quickly is probably what needs to be done. I don't know what the odds are of that ever even coming into play like that again, but – it did in one of the biggest wins Oregon's ever had in their program's history, and certainly one of the biggest wins in college football this year. So too little, too late to change that. But, I can see why they'd want to go and change that now.
Lanning's saying on Monday we spent an inordinate amount of time on situations, and some situations don't come up very often in college football, but this was obviously something we had worked on. You can see the result. I remember back when Bill Parcells was still coaching with the Cowboys early on, and he had the offense where they had, I forgot if it was a 1-point lead or it was a 3-point lead, and there's 5 or 6 seconds left in the game, and on your own 40-yard line, and he had Troy Aikman take a snap, turn around, wait a second or two, and throw the ball through the back of the end zone for a safety. Game over. Clock off. You could even do that throwing a fade pattern down the sideline with 4 seconds left. You're up by 2 or whatever. Just throw the ball as far as you can, high as you can. No one can catch it. You got to be careful about intentional grounding, though. So you have to take the – and you lose – you suck time off the clock, and you don't put yourself in risk of losing a game. From Bill Connolly from ESPN, here are the updated Big 12 title hopes based on his power rankings. The S&P. Iowa State, BYU, Kansas State, Texas Tech, Arizona State, West Virginia, Cincinnati, Colorado, Utah, and then TCU. Now, there's 11 through 16. They're not included. They're out. They're done. But if you actually take 4 through 16, their percentage is higher than 2 at BYU because there's a bunch of like razor cuts, 3 and 4. But Iowa State, a very nice, healthy lead on BYU, slightly ahead of Kansas State. Then everybody else is kind of, and Tech slightly ahead of everybody else, twice as much at number 4.
Here's what Neal Brown should have said. Guys, 3.7%.
Yes.
What are you bitching about?
Yeah, I know.
Come on.
Yeah,
you know, like,
exactly.
So you're telling me there's a chance. Let's do this. No, it's like not surprising. Iowa State's been and BYU the most dominant teams.
So, yep.
Yeah, I think that's the standings basically. So, to get some percentages attached is, another way to look at it. And I think it just kind of says what we already know here is there's 2 really, really good teams, like in terms of undefeated and highly ranked and looking like they're in pretty good shape. And then there's a team in Kansas State that some feel may still be the best team when all is said and done. And then there's a team hanging around who probably will win again this weekend and be 4-0 in conference, but not everybody really believes in yet, and that's Texas Tech. And then beyond that, I don't think anybody else is really much worth the conversation this week. Now, depending on the results this week, Baylor goes and beats Tech or something, Arizona State wins again, then we'll start talking about Arizona State in a different capacity. But, this is pretty much a 4-team race at this point. And, the 2 at the top are pretty clear-cut, but Kansas State is right there nipping on their heels. And Tech, I just feel like everybody's waiting for the wheels to fall off, not go and lose 6 games in a row or anything, but just you're going to take a couple of lumps, whereas I don't know that anybody's as confident in the other 3 taking a couple of lumps. So they're still in a good spot. They're unbeaten in Big 12 play, and they should be ranked relatively soon if they keep winning. But, I think it's pretty much those 4.
All right, so there we have the latest, and again, that can change a little bit. Still a lot of games left, and a lot of games against teams that are either trying to stay alive against teams ahead of them where you could make up some ground. But it does appear, as like you mentioned, some of those teams are entrenched to be there for the long haul. All right, so you know about the Big Ten and SEC. They had their meeting last week. One of what they're trying to do, Matt Hayes of USA Today, and then others around the country also started to have this as well. What they're trying to do, and makes a lot of sense, and I would love it as a college football fan. I would still not like it if it eventually, neuters so many others. But they're looking at the possibility of 12 to 16 non-conference games between the Big Ten and the SEC, on top of what, like, for example, Texas played Michigan, 12 to 16 non-conference games to be added into the schedule. You have eventually another television revenue contract coming up around the corner. I can't imagine that any network would not want to see Ohio State, Alabama, or Michigan against LSU, or
Rutgers, Mississippi State.
They wouldn't be involved. But no, I get it. But there would have to be some of them would have to play each other. But the Michigans, Ohio States, the UTs, the Georgias, the Alabamas, and others being involved in playing each other. And that's, I don't think Texas was that far ahead. But when you look at who they're playing, Michigan, then Ohio State, etc. Alabama last year was non-conference. Oklahoma, Tennessee, which of course is a conference game, but they've played before, and they've also played others. Last year's non-conference schedule, I guess, was really, really bad. Or this year, good for them because they need all the wins. But I would love it. I sit down and watch those games. Now, how many of those games and what do the other teams do? I don't know.
But let me tell you this. And if the Big 12 and the ACC are not going to be part of this, as soon as the ACC figures out who they're going to be, then the Big 12 needs to make a partnership with them too, because you have to enhance your scheduling. You absolutely have to enhance it. If we're going to have to put up with this uproot and shifting of the world, then we better not have to sit through FCS games anymore. I know that sucks for the FCS. It's a hard reality, but I would much rather, if you're going to tell me that the thing I've loved, and I've loved kind of the way it is organizationally as far as who my team plays over and over again, is going to change, then I better get more of the good stuff than who we playing this week. Wofford, great. That's not – we're owed this by the SEC, the Big Ten, the Big 12, and the ACC, at least. The scheduling should be better, in my opinion. Now, I understand that there's to do that means that you leave some schools in the wake. But, I mean, if that's what we're being told and this is how it's going to be, then you better make most of the weeks pretty good weeks. That's all I'm saying. If it's about TV, then give me 12 good TV programs.
Yeah, there's a lot of things here. Man, I mean, first of all, I know there's some people that believe in the future of a Super League and some people that don't. And I think some of that just boils down to what's your definition of it. And I think that –
Or who you like?
Or yeah, I guess so. I mean, I don't think that really matters if you think it's going to happen or not. But I do think that what you consider to be the Super League might not be what it actually is, but when you look at it, it basically is a Super League. Like my definition is very clear. My definition is like it's all the blue bloods. It's like 20 teams maybe, and that's it. But I will acknowledge that if it's a Big Ten SEC only league, that might not be my definition of a Super League, but for a lot of people, that will be a Super League, right? So this might not be what it looks like in your head when you think of how they're forming a Super League. But if you look at it from a different point of view, this is how they're forming a Super League. Is now they've taken an entire week off the calendar for basically everybody in their arsenal to play within each other, and that's one less opportunity for anybody else, including the Big 12 and ACC, to play any game. So basically you're left with 2 weeks on the calendar where they're not playing anybody from their own conference or from the SEC or the Big Ten. 2 games left on the entire schedule. Now, the number of conference games needs to get figured out. Is the Big Ten going to drop one?
That's a prerequisite before they do this next. Yeah.
So is that going to get figured out, and is that going to mean the Big Ten drops one or the SEC gains one? And
no. The Big Ten has made it very clear they're not dropping a conference game.
Yeah, so the SEC –
they're not dropping below 9.
Everybody that's been candid about it in the SEC has been, yes, 9 games is inevitable because – and they're smart enough to know that you can't pretend to be, out for world domination and then going, we're only going to play 8 games. You're like, well, okay. We're all going to play 9, so you've got to do that. So, I think so.
Yeah, I get that, but it's also mentioned in one of the articles that if you were to drop one of the conference games, if you're the Big Ten, then you could create up to like 20 different matchups with this agreement. Whereas if you both go to 9, then you get like 14 or 12. You get 12 games. So that's what I'm saying is like, y'all are probably right. That's the way it will go. But on the other hand, there is a way where you get more of those crossover matchups if the Big Ten were to drop down to where the SEC has just the 8 conference games. Either way, it's filling up the schedule. This has been teased and talked about for a long time. I don't think it's great news. I don't necessarily think it's bad news, but I don't think it's good news by any means for the ACC or for the Big 12.
No, not at all.
And you're starting to get boxed out a little bit. So, yeah, that would be somewhat concerning to me, and I'm with Paul. Like, I think you've got to go come up with your own arrangement and have Boston College playing Iowa State or whatever the situation would be. And this is where I see Sankey and them talking about, we're not doing it. What are we doing? We're not doing it. And it's like these moves are very calculated, and they're very much boxing out the possibilities moving forward. And y'all are also the 2 demanding automatic spots, and now you're scheduling to where there's almost no room for anybody else. So it's almost like it's very carefully worded, the actions. And, well, I'm not technically doing that, but I'm actually really doing that. Yeah. It just doesn't, it's not that black and white. That's how it feels to me, at least. Smartest guys in the room. But, yeah, this is very interesting and kind of what's been teased for a while, so would not be surprised to see this come to fruition and would be pretty seismic in terms of how it would affect some of those smaller schools' paydays and also how it would position the other conferences.
And when you play yet another mega game, alpha dog, whatever you want to call it, there's also then the reason to say we want more people in the college football playoff because we're playing these huge games during the year rather than, again, a game where you pay somebody to come play in your stadium. That'll be kind of interesting to watch. And if the Big 12, you're right, Paul, if the ACC figures out their mess whenever that might be, the first thing they need to do, there's still going to be some matchups that aren't quite as intriguing, like Rutgers against Mississippi State. But if the ACC settles down and they get their shit in order, then the Big 12 and the ACC need to have an alliance. It won't get as much attention, and you need to have them play a crossover game.
They should be talking about it right now.
Yeah, I know.
Like literally, they should be talking about it right now so that whenever that is, that we figure out who's going to be where, then they can just go ahead with it. Even if some of the teams wind up in the Big 12, if the ACC still exists. Like
Utah with Baylor.
Yeah, they've got it.
BYU and Baylor.
Because the only games that are going to be protected in that are this super rivalry games. So, for example, Georgia and Georgia Tech would be the only one that would be protected, and even then I'd be nervous about it. But I think both sides of that would be like, well, we don't want to go the way of Bedlam, But
you sure?
I don't know. Like they may say no. Now, yeah, like Florida and Florida State, I can never see a day where that doesn't happen. But even still, like
I never thought I'd see UCLA and USC in the Big Ten.
Yeah, all that.
Stanford in the ACC and SMU as a part of the ACC, or even the other changes that we have seen.
And one other thing from one of those articles and talking about the number of conference games, and y'all say, well, the Big Ten's already said that they're not going to switch on their number of conference games, but 4 schools in the SEC is from USA Today. Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, Kentucky have games against in-state ACC rivals they want to protect. And Southern Cal has Notre Dame, Oregon has Oregon State, and Washington has Washington State as protected non-conference rivals. Those 7 don't want a 9-game conference schedule and a non-conference game against those teams and another game that you're now playing cross ACC, SEC. So that's where I'm coming from is like, I don't think that's as much of a layup. So maybe you could get the big, but I mean that's part of the conversation.
Or maybe they just don't have the alliance schedule.
Or maybe they just have to do it and they don't get their way.
Yeah.
And they have to play that type of schedule, and that's what comes with the territory of all that big money. Is the schedule is going to be bat-esque crazy from start to finish, but you're going to be making this many millions of dollars. You're just going to have to deal with it in this new landscape. But that's something that still needs to be figured out. And I mean, I get it. It totally makes a lot of sense. And this is where it's been directing, the conversation and the meetings they've been having and all of that's been heading in this direction. So we'll see how others respond. And quite frankly, it doesn't even really matter how others respond. It's just it's every man for themselves. And you can't look at every action as like, well, now we have to react as the Big 12. It's like you just need to figure out your own path at this point because they're not worried about your path. That's very clear. They are not worried. They're not trying to schedule agreement with you. It's them two. They've separated, and they've made it clear in exact words of, I'm not worried about anybody else. Like, I'm the SEC commissioner. I don't care about anybody else but what we're doing, and it's their job to catch up to us, not the other way around. While you add the biggest brands, have the most money, have the most advantages, are demanding the most playoff spots before a game's even played, and now are wiping off an entire week on the schedule to play just each other. Yeah, you're not a part of the same party, Big 12 and ACC, and that's been very clear, but it's clearer than ever now.
The TV money will explode even higher on top of the college football playoff money that will go to maybe 16 games even after, the next couple of years. It's so interesting because we've been around. I've been here since 2010 in the Waco area. Paul before that, and Craig, and I think 13. That Baylor had a horrible, it was a really bad non-conference schedule, and one of the things they put together was because they didn't go to a bowl game for nearly 2 decades, so they started to put some layups and to get 3 wins or whatever it was. And then they finally beefed it up because they got to be pretty good for about a decade, and it's weird that BYU back-to-back years, Utah back-to-back years, and by the time they played those teams, other than 21 or 2, was conference games. Last year, Utah was non-conference. The year before that, BYU non-conference. So I love seeing better games, but I don't want to see – I also feel, and I understand nobody may have any heart here either, and I get it. It's football, it's business. But schools like UT Chattanooga, Wofford, Tarleton State, among others, these games against some of the Power 4 schools or other schools – it like helps their survival. And so, but nobody may care
Craig
about
Sankey
that.
doesn't care about Middle Tennessee State surviving.
No, I
If the
know.
balls
I
can
get
get.
it.
He doesn't care about NC State surviving.
No,
yeah.
And you know what? I'm not faulting him either. It's not his job to care about that. He's not the college football czar. And he's got to do what's best for his league. And look, his counterpart's doing it all without the backlash because he's not as out front as Greg Sankey is.
Petiti,
but he's
yeah.
doing the exact same thing in conjunction. But I mean, I'm like, as a college football ecosystem, the way that I've always grown up with it, yeah, those buy-in games like have their place. But as somebody who wants the biggest matchups like everybody else at this point, yeah, give me the arrangement where you're going to have a SEC versus Big Ten week or whatever it's going to end up looking like, or you scatter it sporadically throughout the season. But yeah, from just a pure viewer standpoint, yeah, I would rather see that, even if it's not all great matchups, versus the Auburn Citadel game, that nobody cares about. Sorry, Citadel, but nobody cares.
And
They do.
yeah, but
Even if they get spanked.
I like the ecosystem that you use because it's like, yes, we're tearing down the rainforest, but you guys want this hand cream, right? Like there's no other way to do it. This $50 hand cream that makes your hands not look wrinkled only comes from
almighty.
a berry that's in the rainforest.
Tell
right?
me where that rainforest is.
Well, and for the Big 12, I mean, looking at it from this perspective, this isn't great news for you. It's also been on the wall. It's right.
Yeah.
It's written on the wall like a year ago, if not farther back than that. But my solution to the Big 12's woes are the same that they've always been. Go win.
Yeah.
That's all you can do. That's all you can do. I mean, you can go raise money. You can put together a nice team, but that team has to go win. So go get a couple teams in the playoff. Have one of them go on a deep run. I know the odds of that are low, but that's all you can do at this point. And to think that somehow the college football gods are going to suddenly look favorably down upon you and throw you a life raft that closes the money gap and increases your TV ratings just because you're good people, like that's not happening. And to think otherwise is foolish. So, yeah, I mean, the reality is what it is at this point, that you are maybe the lead dog in the trailing pack, but that pack out front is doing what it can to distance itself from everybody more and more by the day, and you're never going to quite catch up with them, but there is a simple way to try and gain some ground, and that's just to go win games as much as you can.
But what the ACC and Big 12 are getting with all of this, no matter the separation of revenue, they're getting more money. They're getting more money because the college football playoff money increased, and so they're getting more of that. They're just not going to get nearly enough to be in the same neighborhood.
That's also what Greg Sankey's saying when they go, hey.
That's like y'all are going to fight for three spots, basically.
What the hell? There's like, you're getting more money. It's like, yeah, but you get like way more of it, and you're going to get more spots. So, like, yes, we'll take the more money, but.
Yeah, because you get extra money if you actually get into the playoff and if you win a game. Yeah.
If they get their way, they're going to start out with twice as many, if not 4 times as many as you have just to start. Just to start the playoff. They're going to get 4 automatically. And you're going to be lucky to get your 1. And the other
I don't think they're going to get 4.
Well, but that's exactly what they're politicking
No,
for.
I get that. But you
okay,
asked
so
for
they're not going to get 4.
3. Still, that's 6 of the 12.
They're not going to get 4. They're going to get 3 apiece.
Yeah.
So, yeah, half the field, and you're going to be lucky to get 1. And then there's still going to be a year where they're going to get 4. Like, there's still going to be, like, it might not be automatic, but Tennessee's got 2 losses, but they played so-and-so and so-and-so. You know that's coming.
Yeah, but what about the loss to Mississippi State? Yeah, but they beat LSU.
Here's all I'll compare it to. We worked at a place that took away our health insurance, and then he told us, yeah, but you'll have more in your check. And you're like, yeah, but I'm going to take and spend that money on health insurance.
We were spending, we had to pay the company like $135 a month for that or 4.
Yeah. He's like, well,
and it cost us $800.
Yeah. You'll have more in your check. No. I mean, yes, on Friday, but on Monday when I pay the bills, it doesn't matter. I'll have less.
Well, quick note or two. Both of them in
That's
a way.
the logic when you're like 6 whiskey and sours deep at all times.
By 4 o'clock. The Earl Campbell Tyler Rose Award. Bryson Daly, the quarterback of unbeaten top 25 Army. It just does my heart good to say that about either Army or Navy for right now, and I hope it continues until they play each other. Probably not, but it's great. Bryson Daly, 136 yards rushing, 4 touchdowns on just 12 carries, 102 yards passing and a touchdown. The 5th consecutive game with 100 rushing yards. He's in the top 10 in rushing yards per game. But this week, he is the Earl Campbell Tyler Rose Award National Player of the Week. And there is a good chance we get Bryson Daly on this show before the week is up. Being in communication with Army, he had himself, and Army's having himself. What a great run. What a story it's been.
Yeah, he's from Abernathy, Texas. So that's part of the award is you're either from Texas or play in Texas. So he qualifies because he played his high school ball and was born in the state. And Evan Stewart of Oregon gave him a run for his money. I think that was obviously the bigger game, and Stewart's performance seen by a lot more people. But I also think that sometimes you got to spread the love around, and certainly Bryson Daly's been knocking on the door of that weekly honor and deserved it with his biggest performance thus far. So Evan Stewart had a nice week, and there were several others that had pretty nice weeks, but I definitely think Bryson Daly was deserving. And yeah, the Army football program is in a really nice spot right now, and he's leading the charge of that. So to see them get a little bit of love was pretty cool because that's not often the case.
One other note, speaking of Army, Jeff Monken, BYU's Kalani Sitake, Iowa State's Matt Campbell, and Miami's Mario Cristobal, Navy's Brian Newberry, who has a history of being here at Baylor, and Pitt's Pat Narduzzi. Their combined record last year as head coaches, 33 wins and 41 losses at this particular time. They're now last year. They're now 35-0. 33 and 41 last year. Those coaches combined, and they're now combined 35-0. That is flipping the switch. Good for them, all of them. And it's great to see Kalani Sitake, Matt Campbell on that list, but really Brian Newberry, Monken, Narduzzi, and Cristobal, and all the others involved. So there we are with a nugget about turning the season around.